You know, the older I get, the more I appreciate older cars. It seems like they put more effort into the details and making the cars stand out more from each other back in the day than what they do in the mass-produced vehicles today. So what I want to do in this video is do one of these proper modernization of a 60s car. In this case, we have the beautiful 1968 Cadillac DeVille sedan right here. So I'm going to modernize this and turn it into something that could be designed today. Maybe these proportions are a little bit too big for a modern car, but at the same time it would be a very unique, cool Cadillac if it was built today. Of course, there are a lot of things we need to modernize in this car. For example, we have the graphics in the rear, the chrome pieces right here. We have this chrome trim piece that goes through, and the door handles need to go. The roof and everything like that, the greenhouse, you can see just how small of an area that is actually being taken up by the greenhouse. If we were to look at this from a side view, this distance right here is what is space for the occupants. Everything else is either you have a big V8 under here or you have the big trunk in the rear here. So this is pretty interesting to see this era of cars, just how big the boot is. You can basically fit anything you want in the trunk of this car. So very convenient if you're moving a lot to have one of these DeVille sedans, I guess. One line that I really love on this car is, I think you can see it. It's one of these lines that goes from the front all the way to the back, and it's basically one single unbroken line, and that is of course this line right here. As you can see, the shoulder line keeps the same kind of sharpness all throughout, from the front all the way to the back, and I think this looks like a modern line, and that's one of the lines that I definitely want to keep here in this redesign. I want to keep this line right here, and I also want to add something to catch the body in the bottom here. So maybe have some sort of line that bends out like that, so you have a shelf right here, something like this. We're gonna have to play around with that. In the rear, remove all the chrome. I'm not a fan of chrome, but I think we're gonna have some American Racing wheels right here and upgrade the wheels as well. And you see the chrome bumper in the front here needs to go. We need to lower this part right here, and of course the side and the rear, we're gonna have to bring that closer to the ground in order to make it look like a modern car. But what I love about this car is the overall Cadillac design language that stuck with Cadillac up until 1990s. With the DeVille sedan of the 90s, you still have the covered wheel here, and they kind of modernized this in a way. You still have the same kind of body lines in the 1990s. Of course, the proportions are a lot smaller because that's the way of the 90s. You didn't have the same kind of proportions you had in the 60s, but the key features and the design approach is still pretty much very similar to the 1960s. Another thing I want to do here with the C-pillar, I like the greenhouse here. It's a very structured looking thing here. There's not a lot of over styling going on, as they usually didn't happen in the 1960s. But what I want to do here, another thing I want to add is the C-pillar treatment. I want to have it be reaching out a little bit further here, so we cover this piece right here and it sticks out and blends a little smoother into the trunk of the car. So with that said, let's jump in here and let's continue this redesign, and let's see how this 1968 Cadillac DeVille sedan is going to turn out. I think the cars of the 1960s and the 50s, and I'm going all the way back actually to the 30s, up until I would say the 70s, that was a era where I think the designers of the cars, they had a lot of fun designing new cars. There was a lot of freedoms. You didn't have a lot of regulations that's been setting in yet into the automotive industry, and that really shows in the crazy concepts of this era. And it's kind of lost today because part of it is the mass production of cars, and part of it is the introduction of the crossover. Everybody wants a crossover these days, which means that sedans, cool sedans and interesting wagons and stuff like that, they're being phased out in order to bring in a lot more generic looking crossovers, which is kind of a shame. So I think, if I've said this before, if we look back at cars for different kind of manufacturers and take some of the key models from those manufacturers and try to make some modern style out of those lines and those proportions and shapes, is going to be a very interesting automotive field of cars if we implemented old designs in a modern way. Of course, these 1960s proportions here, so they're not gonna work in today's world, but at the same time, it's still fun to see what we can do with these proportions. I think that it's a gorgeous car. The thing about these cars from the 60s is they do have a lot of lines that stretches from the front to the end, and kind of encapsulates the entire proportion. So it might look like a big car, but the lines that sweeps around the car and on the side and on the back and front, they kind of makes everything work very well together and still looks very elegant and smooth. A lot of cars from this era, and the DeVille sedan here is definitely no different, with this specific line that stretches in the side of the body. And you also have this little uptick in the window line, in the lower part of the window line. I think that in combination with the shoulder line gives it an already very modern approach to the treatment of this surface. What we need to do here in general is just basic changes to the trim pieces and to the original features of this design to make it modern and make it look like for example, the bodywork could be produced today with modern manufacturing methods, and at the same time work a little bit more on the proportions to make them look modern. For example, the rake of the C-pillar and the rake of the rear end. The undercarriage needs to be covered more, and we need to bring the entire car lower to the ground. But overall, it's a very fun design, and I miss doing these old redesigns, or modernizations, I should say in this case, from cars of the 60s, because as I said, there are so much cool design going on at that time, the 50s, the 60s. My personal favorite is the late 60s and the early 70s. That's when it comes to muscle cars, at least, or US cars. I think that's the golden era when it comes to this type of design, where you have the long stretched lines and you have the muscle still until right before the muscle era ended in the late 70s and early 80s. We had a very interesting boxy shape of designs here in the US. 90s the same, but then we started to go into the melted cheese era in the early to mid 90s, and then 2000s were just a blur of gray, boring designs. But we're coming back now, I think. So if you look at Cadillacs today, they still have a lot of similarities to the early 60s Cadillacs, specifically with the rake design and a very sharp looking design. They still have that today. I think Cadillac is one of these companies that really kept their traditions when it comes to their approach to their design, specifically when you have the center line going from the front and also the rear. It kind of folds in the middle. That still is on pretty much every single Cadillac today, and the overall sharp look of it. And I don't know if this enthusiasm from designers are going to come back, because I think it's lacking a little bit today. It's definitely been lacking the last 10 years. Talked about this before. I think that has to do with the ICE, the internal combustion engines, being phased out. We've done everything we can do with the package that comes with an internal combustion engine, meaning you have the engine in the front or the middle or in the rear, then you have a transmission, and you need to build your car around that. So the introduction, of course, of the electric platform, hopefully, is not going to result only in these bubbliness cars that we see, bean-looking cars. We have a very long greenhouse, and compared to this, it's the complete opposite of the DeVille sedan here, where you have the C-pillar almost stretching all the way back to the rear end and the A-pillar stretching almost to the front end of the car, or at least right above the front axle. And that's kind of what I think we're gonna have to expect moving forward with the electric platform. Some bean looking cars looking almost like a bubble like this, or a bean, but at the same time I think we should still have electric cars that focuses on just looking awesome and cool designs, because we had it back in the day. These are not the most efficient shapes, and this has been going on for as long as I can remember, that we have designs that don't focus only on being as efficient and fuel efficient as possible. And I think we can take that philosophy that we have design over function into the electric car era. So we can make some they don't have to be very slippery, all electric cars, and you can lose range. That's fine for me if the car looks really, really cool and has a different approach to design. Even though it might sacrifice some range and some efficiency, I think it's important to keep the variety of designs coming, even as we move into the electric car era, such as we have with the supercars. We have it with SUVs and sedans, wagons. We have all these kind of category of cars, which I prefer to still have in an electric car era, even though in the beginning now, I think everybody's focused so much on range and efficiency that all manufacturers are sticking to this bubbly bean shape in the beginning. But as battery technology becomes better and better, I think I would love to see cars just differentiate a little bit more in their design, even if they are EVs. Talking about this redesign here, I think if I saw this design out on the street now, it would blow my mind to see something like this rolling around today. It's almost like a not a steampunk, but a cyberpunk approach to design here, taking old traditional muscle car with huge proportions and adding some sharpness into that and some LEDs in the rear, removing the chrome, introducing some black parts onto the car, and of course changing up the wheels. I think this is just proof that the designs of the 60s still hold up today, and that all comes down to the simplicity of the designs. And the less complex a design is, the more timeless it becomes, I guess, is what I'm trying to say, because there are fewer design features that will stand the test of time. And if you remove design features and you go back to the basic geometries, those simple shapes are always going to work no matter what time period we're in. And I think the lower line that I added to kind of catch the body but still have the fuselage shape, it adds a lot of sharpness and modernization to the car, and it works well with the sharp shoulder line. So we have a shoulder line on top, and then we have the bottom line at the bottom to kind of mirror the top line as well, and it works out really great. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care.